Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, it's always interesting to follow the member from Regina Rosemont, and I caution the people because that side of the House seems to want to defer from some of the facts and go with their own agenda, and it just, a lot of times it doesn't make sense. I'll just put that out there. Mr. Speaker, this is a responsible budget by a responsible government that was brought down last week. It's a budget that we actually brought in last week, and this budget keeps us on track to what we need to do to get this province back onto a balanced budget. We're getting away from the resource revenue that we were so dependent on for years. But this is a plan. It's a plan to get away from the dependence on resource revenue, and a plan to move back to a consumption tax and to get back to a balance in 3 years, which would be next year. This is a plan, and the plan, Mr. Speaker, I would say is on track. It's a responsible plan, and it's not going to tack a lot of debt on our next generations. That's the kind of budget that we brought down, that was brought down by the honourable member from Humboldt-Watrous last week. Mr. Speaker, and my condolences go out to her and her community, and especially to the families of the Humboldt bus tragedy. The member had indicated that for the last few months, that's all she had on her mind was the budget, the budget, the budget. And then 4 days before the budget, the bus accident really took her mind off the budget and had to attend to the concerns of her constituents. And again, my condolences, like everybody else's, goes out to that community and those families and all that is affected by it. I also want to just mention the town of Nipawin. And I served in both those communities in my previous employment, and I know both communities, and as much as there's a rivalry in the hockey industry from the hockey game from in Humboldt and Nipawin, I'm sure that the Nipawin Hawks is felt as bad as everybody else and the citizens up there. Just a tragic accident, and for sure our condolences go out to them. Mr. Speaker, before I get too far into the budget address, there's a few people that I would like to acknowledge, and first and foremost, of course, is my wife Debbie. She's been a true supporter right through different employments and different opportunities, and for sure in my work here, not only in the legislature, but especially in the constituency of Moose Jaw North, going to different events and being there in support of is always somebody I can bounce ideas off of, and I certainly appreciate her input. I'm a bit of a stickler about having our constituency office open, as we say we are, as representatives of our constituents. I don't think my office has been closed for 2 days in the last 10 years because we're quite committed to serving the public and serving the constituents of Moose Jaw North and Moose Jaw. So I want to give kudos to my office assistants, Judy Hatfield, who is very diligent in doing the work on behalf of the constituents, looking after their needs, and also to Rosalie Boots, who fills in from time to time. I'm certainly blessed to have that kind of assistant in the constituency office. Mr. Speaker, I haven't had an opportunity, but I want to congratulate the member for Rosthern-Shelburne, our new premier, our new leader. Very strong in his passion for Saskatchewan, will represent us very well, not only in all corners of this province, but nationally and internationally. I appreciate his leadership and his direction, and wish him well, and offer certainly all of my support, as of all the members here. Mr. Speaker, I want to also acknowledge the new members that we welcomed into this legislature from Kindersley and from Melfort and from Swift-Current. Great gentlemen who will represent their constituents well, and we wish them well and welcome here. I also want to congratulate the leader of the opposition, who actually comes from my hometown. It's interesting that I know his mom and dad very well. They're constituents of mine, and they actually were members of our party and supporters of mine a few years ago. I don't think they still have their membership in the party, but I know secretly they certainly still support me, even though they won't do it publicly, and very nice people. I'm certainly proud to have them. I know Mr. Miley is a very strong initiative, a good businessman in the community, and I know where his heart is, and I thank him for that. The Leader of the Opposition is, I welcome his new perspective and the idea that he wants to do, I think the way he expressed it was wants to do politics different. And you know, that certainly is a nice touch, refreshing from what we've known. But I guess my question, Mr. Speaker, when is he going to start doing this? Because we really haven't seen it at this point. He says he wants to do politics different, and yet I quote from Hansard on Tuesday, March the 27th, and this is what he said. We head a little further west to my hometown of Moose Jaw, where they just saw their sewer rates go up by 6%, the water rates go up by 9%, and 2 years increase over 12% for their property taxes. A direct result, he says, according to Mayor Fraser Tolmie, of cuts in the 2017 provincial budget. Mr. Speaker, I took exception to this, and I took that quote and showed it to the mayor and went over it with him, and he said that's not what he said. Our mayor is very committed to working with us, to working with senior governments, because he knows consultation and communication is the best way. Well, to go a little further, our researchers went and found where this quote from the Leader of the Opposition may have come from. It was from Discover Moose Jaw. It wasn't a direct quote, it was in a report. But even when you read the report, he had to twist it for some political benefit. And yet he wants to do politics different. You know, Mr. Speaker, we were sitting here listening to the budget, eloquently presented by the Minister of Finance. And right after she talked about the plan and how the plan was on track, the plan to get away from resource revenue, the plan was on track, how to bring it back into balance within 3 years. She finished doing this 45-minute presentation, and the member from Saskatoon-Nutana gets up, the finance critic, and says, the first thing out of her mouth, or one of the first things is, there is no plan. And I was almost embarrassed for her, Mr. Speaker, because you could see the body language of the people around her. They were kind of rolling their eyes and shaking their heads. Even a comment from your gallery, Mr. Speaker, said, wasn't she thinking or wasn't she listening? And it's strange, but that's the kind of way they promote themselves and the way they want to do politics different. Mr. Speaker, it's phenomenal the way we have to correct the preambles to a lot of their questions. And the things that they do say. The member from PA Northcote, in one of her quotes, talking about the bridge and the repairs to the bridge, and when we took over government, we had to invest quite handily into repairing the PA bridge. But on March the 22nd in Hansard, she said, as recently as 2005, the NDP contributed 4.3 million dimes in that year alone. Now, is that trying to mislead the public? Like,
I think so.
Did she think that we were going to think, well, she said dollars? But in actual fact, it was $430,000 that they put into it. But to say dimes instead of dollars is a mislead, and that's the way they operate. So we have to be very careful. And they wanted to do politics different. Mr. Speaker, the member from Saskatoon Centre last week, and the member from Athabasca went along with this too, talking about the millions of dollars that were left in the Treasury when we took over in 2007.
You said mislead.
I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, I couldn't hear your comments, but...
Sorry, it's just the word misleading, okay? Please, just withdraw it, please.
I will withdraw it. Mr. Speaker, you know, when it comes down to doing the presentations here in the legislature, it just... sometimes we have to be very careful of what we hear from the other side. I know that the member from Saskatoon Centre, when he was talking about where did the money go? Where did the money go? They left a fair amount of money in the Treasury, and to credit, yes, they did. But they didn't look after the province very well or the people very well. I'll use an example of the seniors' income supplement, where it was at $90 in 2007, and it had been at $90 a month for the 16 previous years. Mr. Speaker, we tripled that when we took over the government. And that's not the only place. Like there was a need for highways, there was a need for hospitals and healthcare and education. We had the longest surgical wait in the province. We had the lowest job creation, and we had population loss. Our people were moving away. Mr. Speaker, even when they talk about the global transportation hub, it's always referred to as a scandal. It wasn't a scandal, Mr. Speaker. It hasn't been a scandal. It won't be a scandal. We had the auditor review that whole file, and she said she could find no wrongdoing. Yep. But that's what they still referred to it. Mr. Speaker, if they want to talk about scandals, we can look back at a $35 million Spudco scandal. That's the record of the NDP. If we talk about Murdoch Carrier, there was somebody they fired, and they fired him over allegations of sexual harassment and convicted of assault. They fired him, but they gave him a severance of $275,000. There's a scandal, Mr. Speaker. And Ann Lord, who sent a letter to their caucus saying that she had spent almost $6,000 in caucus funds that she wasn't entitled to. And they hid that for years. Now, Mr. Speaker, there's another scandal. So if they want to look at scandals, they can. But the Global Transportation Hub was set up to help to export the product of Saskatchewan and to grow our economy. And that's a great idea. We're a landlocked province. We haven't access to tidewater. So we've got a global transportation hub that increases the economy, helps attract investment into the province, and exports our goods to our customers all over the world. Mr. Speaker, we were talking about a piece of paper and referring to the $2.5 billion deficit that the Leader of the Opposition wasn't trying to impose. When he was doing that, Mr. Speaker, they didn't know what we were talking about, and they finally asked us to table this document. Well, it was their document, Mr. Speaker, that the Leader of the Opposition in his leadership campaign was trying to convince the people of Saskatchewan that they should spend $2.5 billion per year on an ongoing basis. And it was so ridiculous that even part of it was an $18 million for farmers not to use pesticides. Mr. Speaker, I got news for him. They don't use pesticides because they want to. They need to use them to protect their crops so we can have an economy, we can have the product sent to our markets and feed part of the world. And they just don't understand that.
Hear, hear.
And yet they want to do politics different. Mr. Speaker, we don't want to run the kind of debt that they would want to run. We're not going to do that. We're not going to pass it on to our next generation, to our children. Mr. Speaker, I want to introduce you to one of Saskatchewan's newest citizens. His name is Malachi. Malachi Xavier Mitchelson. He's my newest grandson.
Wow, congratulations.
Malachi was born the day before Easter. You know, and what a blessing to have a grandson that's born. It would have been even, in one respect, a bigger blessing to have it actually born on Easter Day. But this year being the year it was, he had to live with having a birthday on April 1st for the rest of his life. So he came into the world the day before, and Mr. Speaker, a great baby, a great blessing. He's the brother to Josiah and Isaiah, and the son to my son, Brent, and his lovely wife, Carmen. But you hold this baby in your arms and you look at him and you think, what a blessing. What a welcome to the world. Just to have this child in your arms, so innocent. And then, oh, by the way, your provincial amount of debt that you have just inherited is over $6,000. That would be the idea that the Leader of the Opposition would have imposed on this child. We're not going down that path. We're not going to straddle our children with the kind of debt that they want to bring upon us. Mr. Speaker, our government's expenses are down. The cost of government is substantially less than under the NDP governance. And we will continue to do that. We have reduced travel, we've improved efficiencies, we're planning a future for a strong future, and there's no carbon tax. Mr. Speaker, we want to continue with doing the right thing for the people of the province. This budget is about leadership. It's about responsibility, accountability, control of our expenses. It's about caring for our citizens, making Saskatchewan a better place to live and to work and to raise our children, to enjoy our parks and our amenities, and to cheer for the riders, and to eventually retire with pride and dignity. It's about planning for the future while maintaining a strong economy and a social program now in the present, and growing our province. It's about a budget that is on track. It's about a province that leads the nation in many sectors. Mr. Speaker, there is no carbon tax. I will not be supporting the amendment opposed by the opposition, but I will be supporting the budget brought down by our finance minister. Thank you.